So, hi everyone, welcome. This is Ardon from Firelit, and I will be the moderator of this session. I will keep a close eye on the Q&A and chat in Wova. So please feel free to ask any of your questions over there. So, Wart, if you're ready, you can take it over.
Thank you, Ardon. Let me do that. Share. So there we go. Okay. Thank you very much, Ardon, and welcome everyone. I hope you're having fun at the fourth and final day of US DevDays 2021. I will present about the FHIR registry and FHIR packages. This is, I'll first start with a bit of introduction about myself. You might have seen me around already. I am Weistra, work with Firelit, and I'm the content lead for FHIR DevDays. Also, I am a product owner at Firelit, working for the data modeling side of things, where we have Forge and Simplifier.net and Firelit Terminal, all kind of tools to build FHIR specifications, FHIR packages, FHIR implementation guides. And that's what we'll talk about in this session and in the coming session. I'll quickly show that this slide, this session is part of our Let's Build a FHIR Specification track. You might have joined many of these sessions in the past few days where you've built implementation guides and profiles within Forge and Fish and IG Publisher. And in this session, I will explain to you FHIR packages. And in the upcoming session, publishing with Simplifier.net, will show you how you can make a FHIR specification and build a FHIR package and implementation guide in Simplifier. We'll have one Zoom link for this session and the upcoming session, so you can stay around and join if you want to. I'll hand out the exercise at the end of this session, so then you can already get going and ask questions in the first half hour. Later in the day, actually overlapping with my session is a presentation from my colleague in the Fix with FHIR track, where he's going to show Firelit Terminal. So this could be very interesting if you're a command line person and want to automate your the building of your FHIR specifications. And then later in the day, Chris Moser will talk on advanced FHIR shorthand and tools. Okay, so this session, the goal today is to tell you about how to version your FHIR specification with FHIR packages. And I'll go over first, why would you need packages? Why is this a good way to version your FHIR specification? Then I will explain you what a FHIR package exactly is, what it's contained of, and then we'll go on to how you can actually use them in practice. We'll show you how to find them with the FHIR registry, how to install them on your local computer or in your FHIR server, how to build a new FHIR specification on top of other FHIR packages. And then once you have a nice FHIR specification built, how to create your FHIR package yourself and then publish it to the registry so other people can find and build on it. So let's get going with why would you need packages? And for this, I'm first going to explain a bit about versioning and about how to identify a FHIR resource. So if you have an instance of a FHIR resource, for example, if you see on the bottom that link there, this is a patient on some server. And the server is called server.com/FHIR. That's where this FHIR server lives. And then within that server, this specific resource is identified by its resource type /patient. And then the specific ID of this patient. And then you can even have a history on there. So the second version of this resource. This is a great way to identify a FHIR resource that is unique within your server. So the server URL is part of it. So with that, this is a unique resource. But if you would transfer this to a different server, it might have a different ID there. This works for FHIR instances, so this patient information. But when we look at FHIR conformance resources, like structure definitions, value sets, etc., they need to be unique across servers. You want to be sure that you're using the same US core patient, for example, over multiple servers. And that's why the FHIR specification invented Canonicals for those. Canonicals are basically something that looks like a URL. It doesn't necessarily need to work in the browser. It's very useful if it does, but it doesn't need to. And this canonical was meant to uniquely identify your FHIR conformance resource. So every structure definition or profile, a value set, etc., will have a unique canonical. And when you have this patient resource, it can refer via the method of profile to the specific canonical. So saying, I am an instance that claimed to conform to this specific FHIR patient specification. And the profile itself will have the URL with the canonical loaded in there as its unique identifier. At least that's what we thought. So this is how it would work. You have a patient resource, patient profile. This will specify a canonical, the patient canonical here. And then you might have an observation profile, and the observation profile has its own canonical. So my organization / structure definition / observation. But it will also somewhere within that profile refer out to a patient. So the patient that this observation is about. And it will also do it with the canonical. So by using this unique canonical, this will refer back to this patient profile here. And similarly, when we have a patient instance, it, as I mentioned, can conform via that method of profile to claim to conform to a specific resource here. So this is a nice idea. But what happened to be the case is that canonicals weren't actually so unique across all the FHIR world. For example, just a very brief example here, even the FHIR core patient was using the same patient, same canonical over multiple different FHIR versions. So those are not the same resource necessarily. There will be changes in there and they are using the same canonical. So we needed something else because otherwise we don't know when we're referring from this patient instance about which specific profile we're talking. And that's why we added the version within a profile. So now you can use a profile itself can say, okay, I have a canonical and I have a version. And when other people refer to it, they can combine the two to make this a unique URL. So this is the canonical and then the little stripe thing and then the version. So that is a nice idea. And that would work in this case. So in this way, so the profile itself has the version in there and all the other people who refer to it will use the version when referring to it. And that is a good idea, but this individual versioning of resources also has some problems. For example, that it will be quite hard to put the right set of profiles together. You'll need to figure out, okay, version 1.2 of the patient profile goes with version 1.3 of the observation profile because we made already more changes to that, etc. So you need to put all these things together. And secondly, if we, for example, in this case, would only change the version number within the patient profile, we also need to change all the other resources that point to it. So when we're just making one change in this profile, we have a cascading set of changes to all the instances and all the other profiles that refer to it. And that's basically why we came up with FHIR packages. And this is not necessarily a new thing. We borrowed this from the software world, where we version a group of resources together rather than versioning the individual items. What we see here is that within this package called my.example.package and then version 0.0.1, we will have one patient resource and one observation profile. So whenever we have a patient instance that is evaluated against these other canonicals, it's referring to these other canonicals, as long as we know which package to refer to, so what the scope is of this evaluation, then there will be only one patient and only one observation profile in there. So we don't need to use the individual versioning anymore. And then later, if we have new versions of these resources, we can release new packages, which again have a coherent set of resources that are versioned together. So this is why we have FHIR packages. And then let's go on to say, what are FHIR packages? What is actually in there? And for this, I have this little animation here. We see this little box that is waiting to get opened. This box is a FHIR package that is being downloaded from, for example, Package Registry, which we'll see later. It's called my.example.package, and there's a version there, and it's a DGC, so with a tarball and then gzipped. And that's just a fancy zip file that will contain basically only one thing, and that is a package folder. If you open this up with 7-zip or something, there is one folder in there called package. And within that package folder, there will be multiple things. First of all, there will be a package.json, which is the package manifest. This is the little metadata file that will tell us all things about this package. What's the name, etc. We'll come back to this in a moment. And then within that same package folder, there will be a bunch of resources, which are all the conformance resources that anyone else needs to validate against this specification. So there will be profiles in there, code systems, implementation guides, etc. And they will all be done, they will all be in JSON format there. That's just what we agreed on. And then there can be other folders in here. For example, there can be an examples folder, and you can put any patient or any example resources in there for people to use. And other folders are also welcome to be in there, like an XML, if you really want to distribute the XML with it, or other folders. So that's physically what it looks like. Then the specification itself is defined on Confluence. So this slide deck should already be shared somewhere in the document. So this is a link you can click to learn more about the FHIR specification of packages. It's based on the NPM packages. So this is from JavaScript world. We tried not to reinvent the wheel here. And the nice thing of packages is that they will always be around. So if you're using this as a building block, you can be sure that it will always be around and it will always be stable. So once you've downloaded it, it will never change. That's really nice. But from the publisher side, of course, you also want to be able to tell people, well, you should probably not use this anymore. Since we can't delete it, we can only unlist it. So that's a hint to other people, like it's deprecated, you should not be using this package version anymore. And packages are also being used to distribute implementation guides. So let's come back to a moment to that package manifest, this metadata file, package.json. This is on the left here what it looked like. You'll see a lot of different fields in there, but there's only a few of them that are actually mandatory, which is a name. So you need to have some kind of name, and we'll discuss naming and versioning, version numbers in a little bit later in the slide deck. The description, you need to give some kind of human readable description for people to see what the package is about, and it needs an author. So you need to be clear on who has made this package. And then those are the minimum requirements, but if you're using it to distribute your implementation guide, then you also need some extra parameters, and you also want to keep them in sync with your RG resource. One thing that I want to point out here is that jurisdiction is something which is new that we're going to add to the package specification so that we're easily able to filter packages for the only packages that are relevant for the US or for the Netherlands for that matter. Good, so that was the first half. And now let's see what we can actually do with those packages. First of all, of course, when we start doing anything, we want to find the package that is relevant to us. And for this, the FHIR specification, or the FHIR HL7 International, has commissioned Firelit to build the registry.fhir.org. And this is what we're first looking at for finding packages. So this is what it looks like, registry.fhir.org. And let me actually show this in real life. I'm just going to click this here, and then we go to the browser here. So this is registry.fhir.org. Feel free to go there. This is the really useful page to find any prior art within the FHIR specification. For example, if you're looking for US core, US, my Bluetooth keyboard needs to reconnect, US core, very easily we find US core here. So every specification is being distributed as a package here, so we always have this access to this. Let's have a look, for example, first at US core. So when we click on this US core package, we'll see that this package has a name. So this is the hl7.fhir.us.core. And the current version is 3.2.0. That's the latest version. There's a bunch of older versions, if we look on the right here, even from older FHIR specifications. It has a nice description. It has a canonical. And we can also here get the direct link to the implementation guide, so the package homepage, where you can read more about what the US core is about. And we can view it on Simplifier and also look on the different files that are in there and see a nice visualization of them on Simplifier. So this is US core. Let me do a few other searches. For example, if you're wondering whether there's anything related to COVID, I just might be interesting these days. So there's already, you see these nice German packages for people who have defined questionnaires around COVID, or who have defined value sets around complications that you might get with COVID. So this is a really nice way to find prior art. If you can't find it in the FHIR specification itself, and also that one you can search here, you can find it here and see if there's anyone else who already has something. So is there anything with genomics in FHIR? We can quickly find FHIR packages or resources within those packages that are relating to that. Final search, maybe DaVinci. You can quickly see all the different specifications that DaVinci releases, and then specifically the latest version of those. So let's click into one of them, HRX here. What we'll see here, and here we're going to the next step. We found the package that we're interested in. Now, how can we use this? And for this, we can, if we want to work with this on our local computer, we can install this package on our computer. And what that means is just we're downloading that fancy zip file and it's installing it in some secret folder on your computer so you can work with it. We can do this via the NPM standard, but I'm here going to show you the Firelit terminal command line tool that we specifically built for working with FHIR. And here we see that we can copy this and we can run this on the computer, and then we can easily install a package. So let me go back to the slide deck here and continue. Continue in a moment. I'm going to come back to installing in a moment. First, I want to tell you how the registry works. So what we just seen here is the UI for the package registry, which is registry.fire.org. This is really nice for humans, but then for computers, there is packages.fire.org, which is an API, and it has a few different endpoints where you can talk to and programmatically find all those packages. So if you want to build anything like this in your server, let people find conformance resources to install, this is what you want to use. And that all builds on Simplifier.net, which has a nice package server which brings all the packages from the world together. So this has access to every published FHIR specification in the world, if it's publicly published. And how this works is that there's many different package feeds. And all these feeds are just like RSS feeds that list all the different packages in the world. And those are being picked up by the package server. And those feeds come, for example, from hl7.org. So the core FHIR specification will be in there, or US core, for example. There will be terminologies published via HL7. The FHIR Foundation is still publishing some packages. And then there's many coming from Simplifier. I'll show a bit, a few in our next session, but for example, Israeli core or the German core or UK core, these kind of things. And then there are some other packages coming from HL7 Australia or IAG. And all these feeds come together within Simplifier and then are being fed to the registry. So there's one UI and one API that you can find every publicly published FHIR specification within the world. So as I said, once we found a package of interest, we can install this within our server. For this, well, I refer to the specific manual of your specific server, for example, HAPI or Firelit server. You can install the package directly or the contents from the package, and then you have exactly nicely versioned set of resources, conformance resources to validate against. And then, as I mentioned, you can locally install it with npm or Firelit terminal. And here's a quick screenshot of how that works. You see here we've installed PDEX. And once we say, okay, FHIR install this specific package and this version, we'll see that it's looping here. We'll see that it's going to install this package, but also all the dependencies that this package is built on top of. And this is a really nice thing from the package ecosystem, that we don't have to redistribute all these different resources. It will just find them from the package registry. And so it's installing, for example, the FHIR core, US core, and another package from DaVinci, because it's building on top of all of those. So that's installing a FHIR package. And then next step, you might want to make your own FHIR specification, for example, building on top of US core, as we're seeing here, for example, in Forge. So Forge, when you open a new project in Forge, you can go to the dependencies tab here, and there you can search on Simplifier for all the different packages in the world. And you can easily click install here, and then you don't need to download entire US core and all the dependencies that you might want to use yourself. Just installing the package is enough, and then you can build your own derived versions of those resources. Similarly, when you're using FHIR shorthand, you can just specify your dependencies in your config.yaml, and then Sushi will figure out all the dependencies here. Similarly, for the IG builder, IG publisher, you can specify that your specific implementation guide depends on other packages and specific versions, and then it will download those for you. And they're all using the same package API behind the scenes. So then you have spec your dependencies, and you might have made some nice new resources. And then, of course, you want to create your own packages for the world to use. So then you might want to use IG Publisher, for example. Whenever you run IG Publisher, it will make a package out of your implementation guide. So in this case, here nl.weistra.acme, and it's installing that to your package cache. And when you publish with HL7, it will also be available in the registry. And similarly, you can use Simplifier, as we'll see in the next session, to have a nice UI to help you through that process and fill all the context that might go into the package.json, and it directly publishes to the FHIR registry. Or you can use a command line tool to package up a local folder to create a package. So now we've made a package, and then of course, while we're making the package, we need to think about how we're going to name it and how to version it. We've seen some namings already, like hl7.fire.us.core. And from this, we can distill that there are some different parts that you might want to use within your package naming. Important, just like when choosing canonicals, is that you publish in a domain that you actually own. So hl7.fire is really owned by hl7. You cannot publish anything in there without Graham's approval. So you will want to put some reference to who's the author or the organization that is publishing here. You also, if you're making specification, you will specify for which region is this relevant. So for example, FHIR core is using UV for universal, US here for the United States, UK, Germany, etc. And then you want some indication of what the package is about. So it can be the core FHIR specification for R4. It can be structured data capture here. It can be the core for the UK, for example. And then there needs to be at least one dot in there, and sometimes more. And so different feeds can have different namespaces. So please, it's just like working with domain names. Only publish in something that you will actually own or control. So that's choosing a package name. That's the only thing you have to do once. And then within that name, you can make many different versions over time. And for this, we are using semantic versioning within the FHIR specification. So there's a few rules about thinking about the version number here. And it starts with this major, minor, and patch version. So again, there's dots in there. And these different levels will indicate how big the changes are compared to the previous version. So if you're changing something really substantial in the FHIR specification or in your own FHIR specification, you will want to change the major version number. If you're only adding some extra features, you might want to up the minor version number. If you're just making some inconsequential typo fixes, that's perfect to do that with a patch version change. So this is an indication to the people who are depending on you, how many changes, how many breaking changes they should expect. If you're not using the little dash and anything behind that, this is a stable version. You're indicating this is stable, you can use this. If you put a dash and anything behind this, this is a preview version. So these kind of labels will indicate to other people, you can use it, but it's not ready for prime time yet. So let's look at an example. We have our development branch going on here of our hypothetical FHIR specification. And we have been building for a while. And when we're ready for our first public release, where people should be able to depend on this, we're going for our 1.0.0 version. So before that, we're going to only release 0.1, etc. With 1.0.0, we're signaling, okay, this is something that you can start using in your production servers. Then at some point you might have made some changes, maybe some typos, better descriptions, etc. And then you only want to change your patch version. And then we might indicate to other people, well, this is a better version of the package, so you might want to upgrade to the newer one, and we're unlisting the older version. At the same time, while the other package is still live, we might already start building on a 2.0 version of our package, where we're going to introduce some major breaking changes, but we're not deprecating the old ones yet. So we're releasing a 2.0.0 here, and we're specifying this is release candidate 1. So this is a preview release for all your customers who might want to prepare themselves for when the actual 2.0 launches, so they can already look at it and prepare themselves for what's coming up. And at some point, you're ready to make that a stable version. You're releasing 2.0.0, and you want to unlist the release candidate version. You might also bring those changes or bring changes that are both going to 2.0 also to your older versions. And you might keep multiple versions live for longer term stable releases. And at some point, you want to even deprecate those and continue with just continue with the 2.x line. So I hope this gives some kind of feeling for semantic versioning. It's really important for your users to not make breaking changes with just a patch update, these kind of things. Then we've found packages, we've built on top of them, we've created packages, and now we need to release them to the world. And of course, if you're building anything publicly, you want to get that into the FHIR registry that we just looked at. There's a few options to do this, and David Hay has made a nice documentation of the different options, and it's linked from this slide deck. But one of them is using Simplifier, and as I mentioned, in the next session we'll go into how to do this. This has a nice UI, and it publishes directly to the registry.fire.org if you want to. Another option is go with the HL7 ballot route. So if you have an official specification and that's going through the balloting, it will be published via the HL7 feeds. And then, as I mentioned before, there's also an option to create your own package feed and have that picked up by the FHIR registry. This is only if you want to make a FHIR specification that you want to share with the world. Of course, it's also possible to create FHIR specification that you only want to use internally. And for this, you can just reuse an internal NPM server, or I think HAPI also provides an NPM server with that. And you can install packages in there and allow only your internal customers to use that. Okay. And I think with that, we have a summary of what we discussed today. We have seen how to version your FHIR specification with packages. It will create a stable collection of all your FHIR resources. It's very nice to build on. So you have some building blocks that you can trust, that are stable, that will not change and will be around forever. And also you can publish stable building blocks yourself for other people to use. And this will give everyone clarity on dependencies, not just searching the entire world for a canonical, but knowing exactly in which packages we should look and not having the need anymore to do this individual versioning in general. Okay, so I think that is all I wanted to cover. I have the link here already, a bit.ly link with the exercises for the next session. So if you want to learn how to create a FHIR package and an implementation guide with Simplifier, you can already go to this link. I'm not sure if there are any questions.
Yeah, there are. There are two questions that just popped in.
Great.
So one from Chris Musel. FHIR seems to use minor versions for ballots, which may have breaking changes. For example, FHIR 4.50, the R5 ballot, has breaking changes from 4.0.1.
Yeah.
Are HL7 IGs allowed to use real semantic versioning?
So what I understand, indeed, so I completely agree with Chris that FHIR, the core specification, is currently not handling SEM very well. What I think is going to happen is that from R5 onwards, we're going to be better with that. I think the next R5 release should probably be released as a package called 5.0.0-release candidate 1, these kind of things, rather than indeed putting these changes in the 4. Anything version space. So as far as I know, this is the intention to start using real semantic versioning. But I agree that as long as HTML7 directly ties the package version to the, well, what I would call like the marketing version number of the specification going through a ballot, that will be a tricky thing. So personally, I would recommend to decouple those.
Okay, thanks, Ward. Then another question from Brian Rhodes. How does the publisher access packages that are only published in the registry? When a FHIR registry feed is constructed, does the IG publisher also know about it?
Yeah, so the IG publisher uses packages.fhir.org on the backend, which is the same registry that all the other tools are using. So as long as it's published in the registry on the API, packages.fhir.org, it will be available to everyone. So regardless of which feed it's coming from.
Okay.
The only real exception is in development IGs. So for example, if your project is still in development within Simplifier or within IG Publisher, they currently have different ways of referring to those. So only if it's a really stable published version that ends up in the registry, everyone can build on it.
Okay, nice. Then we have another one from Jason.
Mm-hmm.
Can there be a case where an application needs to support multiple versions of the same profile? How do you manage that with packages? Yeah,
that is a great point. So I think there's multiple options here. So one of them is you provide multiple API endpoints on your application, and you specify for every API endpoint which package they're using. Another option is indeed to still go with packages, but put 2 different versions of a resource within one package and still use the versioning, the individual versioning that we had before within referring to a canonical. So using the versioned canonicals. I'm not a big fan of it, but if it's really necessary, it's really necessary. I think the FHIR specification also recommends that if you're really breaking changes to different resources, you might even want to change the canonical. So that would be another option. If it's a really different version of the same resource, you might need to add the version number to the canonical. Especially if you need to support both of them at the same time.
Okay, thanks, Ward. I think that those were the questions.
Okay.
There's still some time for other questions. So if people want to ask more, then that's possible. You can also unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'll say for everyone who might be wanting to spend the time on grabbing coffee or something, you can just go to the link. You can already start on your exercises, and indeed, Arden and I will stay around. So from now on, I think we can just make it casual. People unmute and ask any questions that you have. The real session then again will start in about 40 minutes. I think 37 minutes maybe now.
And of course, we will also ask Ward to have a close look on the Q&A session afterwards. And we will go through the Q&A to answer the questions that are there.
Yeah. I'll open those up. Thanks, Jason.
Hello?
Yeah, the difference. Hey, yeah, go ahead, please.
Hi, Ward. This is Brian. I guess you can hear me.
Yes.
So I'm relatively new to FHIR, and I was hoping if it sounds like we got all the hard questions out of the way, but I have some like basic questions that I'm just trying to understand and get the groundwork here for our implementation. So I'm having a little bit of a hard time putting together, at least in my head, like what a profile actually is. It seems like we often use the word profile for structure definition and back and forth. And then there's these things called capability statements and implementation guides and operation definitions. And like, I'm trying to figure out in my head, like what the hierarchy is and like how it all fits together. Like, I just can't get a real good picture of it all.
Okay, good. That's a great question. And oh, I love the drawings. Nice. Good. Let me try a stab at it. So I think generally when you try to make your own specification, you will have you start with some use case and some expected behavior, some workflows, and all this behavior together. You'll try to make one project out of that, and that one project you'll generally will try to describe with a bunch of kind of data models that will go over the line, like structure definitions or profiles on patient or on observation, etc. And so these I always see as kind of the table definitions of different resources. And then you will try to define that entire specification with an implementation guide, which is kind of the documentation around it, is the PDF manual that comes with the entire use case. And then there's a bunch of resources that will, so structure definitions and value sets, etc., are all about the data going over the line. But then there's also a bunch of resources that will describe more the API side of FHIR. So a search parameter or an operation definition or a capability statement will really describe how your server needs to behave or how your client needs to behave. When I'm sending this, these are the possible things you can answer or ask. And that's also another thing you can do in there. So you will have a project with some data model definitions, some API definitions, and together they're all described with some document called an implementation guide. Does that make sense?
It does. So is the implementation guide strictly human readable, or does the implementation guide also enforce rules on the server side? Or does that both?
So an implementation guide, well, it's logical that you get confused because people use the term for multiple things.
Yes, this is my problem.
Yeah, the implementation guide, so strictly there is an implementation guide resource within this FHIR specification, which follows some specific rules, of course, as any other resource, and it will describe, so it's a bit of a mixed resource. It will describe some metadata about your entire project, just like a package metadata would do. It will also describe how this kind of PDF manual will look like. So these are the different pages, and these pages are sub-pages of these pages. It will also describe all the different resources within your project, and which example is an example for which other resource. So this is an implementation guide resource itself, but the implementation guide is also this kind of human readable document. And the implementation guide resource will serve as kind of a backbone for that document. And sometimes people also use implementation guide as kind of the synonym for just a project or a package. So this entire, including all the conformance resources themselves. But to answer your specific question, just the implementation guide will describe all those things. The data model side, but also the API side. And it will add some human readable descriptions on how you should actually implement this.
And does that also cover like examples if you want to give sample object structure or examples to your customers? Or do you put that in the implementation guide as well?
Yeah, so let me maybe just, rather than just talking about it, let me just show some things. So let me take a famous implementation guide called US Core. So when I go to the package homepage, this is what you could call the implementation guide. This is the human readable side of the implementation guide.
Mm-hmm.
What was your specific question now again?
Examples. Are there examples in there?
Yeah, so this will have everything from like human readable descriptions on what is this use case about. It will have for every resource, it will generally have a page, like there's a page here on, I don't know, the care plan resource within US Core, with some of the nice of these kind of renderings that you also see from the FHIR specification. But there will also be example resources in here and links to, okay, this is how an allergy intolerance resource would look like. So this is, I don't know, I always see this as kind of just the HTML version of a PDF manual that would come with like your medicine or something. Just giving people a bunch of machine readable artifacts is just not enough to describe exactly how it needs to be implemented. This is the manual on, this is how you would do it. This is what you need to watch out for. This is what we mean with X. Yeah, so it's just extra guidance around that. But if we look within this package, so this implementation guide is referring to a specific package that we just came from. The HL7.FHIR.US Core 3.2.0. If we look in that package, look in the contents here, there will be an implementation guide resource in here too. Didn't work. Just maybe sort this. And it's a bunch of pages then. All kind of examples in here. Oh, there we are. So there's actually multiple implementation guides in here. I do not see the difference yet. Maybe there's one for, no, actually I just don't know. And yeah, we can look at the rendering here or just look at the XML view or the JSON view. This is a specific resource of the type implementation guide, which will have like, as I mentioned, all this metadata stuff. So what's the package name, what's the canonical, etc. It will have its own dependencies, just like the package will have. And then there's the definition here with all the different resources in there and all the different pages. Maybe our rendering view is better. Yeah, so here's the definition with all kind of resources and extensions that are being used within it and parameters. And somewhere all the different pages. So these are the pages from the human readable document. So yeah, it's a bit of, I'm not a big fan of this resource. It's a bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah, I think the confusing part is people use the terms for implementation guide and profiles, and they're kind of loosely used. So yeah, I'm getting there for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, indeed. Implementation guide is both the resource and sometimes used as a synonym for the project and the human readable manual. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Brian. I see there's a new question, Ardon. Explain what's understood by a resource. From another Q&A, I learned that it's possible to create a custom resource. What does it mean? Yeah, that's another nice term. So a resource, basically any FHIR object. So when we look in this package here, the US Core package, everything in here, whether it's an implementation guide or a structure definition or a patient instance, an example instance, these are all resources. So every XML document, every JSON document in there is a resource. What people mean with a custom resource is that we're saying, okay, you're not using one of the FHIR base resources, but you're really going at it yourself, starting from some low-level FHIR resource. I think that's the domain resource or something.
No, there's a resource called resource. That's the low.
Okay, building on the resource called resource. Yeah. This is generally not recommended to work with that, because if we start really from the ground up, all making our own data models, then it's really hard to be interoperable after that. So if you're using custom resources, that's not really considered to be FHIR. It can be acceptable if you're in a specific domain that HL7 will not go into, like if you want to model bank accounts or something. I've did that just as an example somewhere. But generally, if you want to model something without worrying about the FHIR constraint, you can go with a logical model instead. If you just want to start modeling your patient without actually worrying about what FHIR puts kind of constraints on the patient. And then help me, Ardon, what's the alternative? Building on a basic resource, right?
Yeah, you've got the basic resource.
Yeah.
So already has some definition, but it's yeah, it's also not advised.
So take the basic resource and then use extensions on that to build on top of that. Julia, feel free to unmute and tell me if this was clear or not. Julia's still on the line.
Okay, I think we're also about the end time.
Officially in the break now. And we'll reconvene in half an hour at least, but if people want to stay and ask questions or work on the exercises and ask any questions on that, or feel free to do that. These are beautiful drawings, yours, Arlen.
No, it's not mine. And I was looking how to get it away, but I don't see how to do that.
Clear. All drawings.
This is Jeremy. I'm keeping an eye on it. I don't know where they're coming from, but I can delete them very quickly.
Yeah, I can very well imagine that you're drawing. I think it's only happening for yourself. /publish your simplifier.
So what? Do you need a break or are you already settled for the next one?
I think I will. So we have 15 minutes left, right? 15.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're stopping at 9 our time. Starting at 15. Good. Yeah, I'll do a round of drinks and stuff.
So I wonder, is everyone here in the Zoom also for the Let's Build session?
I hope so. Otherwise, they're just sleeping. Just get coffee. Good. I'll be back.
Wait, perhaps you can put. Are you presenting a slide on your screen? Perhaps you can make an extra text box that says we start at 20.
Okay, we're live adding slides. Good, good.
Because then we can just leave open the Zoom session and people at least know.
I'll put it in this text box. Yeah. If you happen to know the Eastern time.
Yeah, 1 sec. Eastern time is 2:15, so 2:15 p.m.
2 p.m. 15 to 15 p.m. Eastern. Good.
Yeah, it is better.
Ardon? Ardon.
Sorry, yeah. Do you want the countdown slides?
Yeah. Oh, this works too.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't mind some countdown slides.
Shall I do the countdown slides or shouldn't?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind.
Okay. Okay. Let me grab them. And then
Flattenize everything. Flattenize.
Okay. Yeah, I'm coming.
Nice. I didn't have enough time for that.
Right, welcome everyone. This is Ardon from Firelit, and I will be the moderator of the session. And I will keep a close eye on the Q&A and chat in Wova. Let's give the word to Ward again. So Ward, you can share your screen again if you're ready.
Thank you, Ardon. Let me do that. Here we are. So yeah, hello everyone. Welcome back. Welcome. My name is Weistra. I'm from Firelit, and this session is about publishing with Simplifier.net, creating implementation guides, creating packages. I'll quickly reintroduce myself. I'm not sure how many people came over from the previous session, but my name is Weistra. I work at Firelit. I'm the content lead for FHIR DevDays, but I also am the product owner for our data modeling side. So all the tools that we work with to make your life easier to make a FHIR specification completely to your wishes. Forge for desktop profiling, Simplifier for collaboration and publishing, and Firelit Terminal for building on your command line. I want to stress again that this is part of the Let's Build FHIR specification track here at DevDays. You might have attended other sessions in here already. Maybe you've been with me and Jose today, building IGs with the IG publisher. Today we'll do something very similar, but then show you how it's done with Simplifier. There is another talk after me, actually partially during this session by my colleague Martijn, who builds on Simplifier a lot, but he also works on our command line tool, Firelit Terminal. So if you're a command line geek, I will not be offended if you jump off halfway and go there. Or you can also watch that one back later. It will be recorded, so you can also watch it at your own time. I want to give a bit of background what we're talking about today. So this is the FHIR ecosystem, and then mapped to the Firelit tool specifically. I kind of put people in these three classes. So people on the left, they're building a data model, really trying to tailor the core FHIR specification to their own needs. You can do that with Forge, or you can do it with Fish here on the left hand. And then once you're happy with that, you can publish that data model and bring that to Simplifier to work together with your colleagues, or GitHub, or these kind of things. There you work together with your colleagues, and if you're ready to publish something, you publish in Simplifier or in the FHIR registry. And this is really the flow I'm going to talk about today. So I've put a little highlight here. This is what we're going to do this session: publishing a data model and documenting it. As I mentioned, Firelit Terminal, you can use that to do these same kind of things on the command line, do a lot of validation, etc. Once your data model is ready, once our work is done, people who are implementing FHIR API can take that. They take a FHIR server like Firelit Server or Happy or etc. They take a data model, load it in there, put some actual data in it, really secure data, and then they provide a FHIR API. And once that is done, other people building a FHIR application can talk to that FHIR API and actually give you all the nice apps on phones and desktops and whatever, or in your EHR. So this is the part of the ecosystem that we're talking about today, publishing with Simplifier. And then within this, people building a FHIR project, building a FHIR specification. This is kind of the life cycle that I see for these projects. So on the left hand, you start building. Well, actually, no. Let's start here. It always, of course, starts with a use case. You're trying to solve something important within your country or company or your hospital or whatever. And this is where you have a use case. You need to standardize something, work together with other people. It starts with defining that one and getting the right people together. And then you start logical modeling. And you can do this in Fish or Forge or Excel or whatever. Bring together the elements that you will need in your data model without worrying about the specifics of FHIR yet. And then once you have those logical models, you can start actually implementing in FHIR. So then we go into this cycle of continuous improvement of building your FHIR resources and checking them. You can build with Forge and Fish, etc. Either upload them directly to something like Simplifier or do that via GitHub. And then you will document, you will make your implementation guide, you will publish this as a package, what we discussed in the previous session. Then you get all these different versions of packages. And then you will collect feedback from people. And then you continue this cycle until the project has reached the end of its life cycle, basically. So you can create different packages with all their own documentations over time. And this is really what we're going to focus on from that aspect. So we're going to document a FHIR specification, assuming that we already have some resources, and we're going to publish that to the FHIR registry. Good, that was just for some context. Publishing on Simplifier, there's some great names who are already doing this. So there's some great example projects that you can also find on Simplifier and look at on how it's done. You can even see the code from their implementation guide, so you can learn from those. This is, for example, the UK core project that's being developed by the NHS on Simplifier. They also have some really pretty NHS-specific implementation guides there, which gives a nice flavor of how far you can tune them to your own liking. Other projects, SAP is, for example, building their FHIR IG for patient management. There's a German core project here. There's Canada has a really nice FHIR registry with including Canada core, Japan, etc. So these are projects you can find on Simplifier. If you lack inspiration or want to know how it's done, you can find their resources and maybe copy from that and learn from that. So then to the meat of today, this is what we're going to do. Publishing with Simplifier, we're going to create a FHIR development project. We're going to create an implementation guide, so the documentation around it. And then we're going to release that as a stable version for people to use as a FHIR package, and also make sure that the implementation guide documents our specific version that we've released. So please find this link, either type it or it's probably in the chat and the description everywhere. So I think what would be nice if we just go along. I would like actually to see whether people have already started with this. I'm not sure if, are people able to raise hands? And if so, maybe you can raise your hand if you have already started with the exercises. Is that possible? I see one hand, but that's Ardon.
Yeah.
Just checking. No, maybe people cannot raise hands. Unmute.
They can unmute themselves, but they should be able to raise a hand, right?
Oh yeah, there's a raised hand. So at least we know people can raise hands. That's great. Thanks. Good. So if no one has started yet, then I just suggest that we'll go through it together. So I will open the exercises here, and then you can still do them at your own time. So if you use that bit.ly link, this is where you should end up on Simplifier. Maybe a bit of background about Simplifier. So this is, I'll go back to the homepage for a moment. Simplifier is basically two things. It's a collaboration platform where you can work privately or publicly together with your colleagues to create a FHIR specification. And once you are ready, it's also a publishing platform where you can publish your implementation guide and publish your stable FHIR package to the world. So you can see in Simplifier, we have access to all the published FHIR content in the world. The FHIR registry that I just discussed about is built on top of Simplifier. So you have access to all the content to build on that, and also you can publish to that just like, so everyone else will have access to it. Here on Simplifier, you will see there's loads of different projects. Many of them are coming from the US. I think we have here 750 projects here. Germany is also very popular, pretty close with like 700 projects. I think the UK, 200, Netherlands, 200. So you can always dive into these different countries, find resources that are interesting for you. There's many different projects and organizations on here. If you filter by organizations, you can see all different organizations who are in Germany, for example, using Simplifier, like the HL7 in Germany or the MI initiative or KBV, etc., more on the payer side. And let's dive into one specific project so we have an idea of what's possible. For example, let's find the UK core project here. And I'm just going to filter for projects. Let's see, what's the current one? Yeah, this one. So this is a project on Simplifier. And a project, you should really see that as analogous with like one implementation guide or one GitHub repository. So a coherent set of resources that will eventually give you one package or one implementation guide. So this is a project from NHS Digital. They're building on the UK core, so the national profiles for the United Kingdom. And when we come into the project, we'll see an introduction, which has a breakdown of all the different resources by type. And so there will be conformance resources like structure definitions and profiles, value sets, code systems, etc. And then you can also upload example data, which gives people an indication on how to implement the resources that you have. And this will give you a direct link into the resources here. So it will filter on all the different resources that there are in this project. And then on top of that, we can add an implementation guide. So the implementation guide will be the human readable description that comes with this, all the resources that are in there. And it's something we're going to build together in our tutorial. And you can manage who has access to it. You can see who has changed anything. The feedback cycle that I just discussed about, you can collect publicly or within your team issues that are on top of your project or on specific resources. And then speaking of the package ecosystem, every project will specify on what other projects are building. So UK Core is building on the core FHIR specification, but also on other packages that they have released. And from this project, they can also release their own packages so people can build on top of that. So you should really see a project as kind of the development branch of your FHIR specification, where you will always have the latest version here. And the released packages are really kind of tags or stable releases from that project that people can use that will never change. So this is an implementation guide. This is a project, and in these projects there are implementation guides. I showed this one on the slide before, so this is the UK Core one. And implementation guides, well, there are some best practices. For example, you probably generally want to have some page about all the different resources that you have. You probably want to show examples, data. You probably want to give information how people can download the package and how people can contact you, etc. So there, I'll show you some best practices in a moment. I think, well, maybe a few more things then. When we go to our resources, and here we'll dive into the project that we're going to work with. That's built here. So our tutorial is really also a FHIR project, where in the README here, I've put the exercises. So these are the ones you can walk through, and I'll do them together too, just for the group, for people who prefer to listen. In this project, we have a bunch of resources. So I'm reusing the resources that Ardon used in his Forge profiling earlier in this week. And this has delivered us 4 different profiles. So there's a profile on patient here. There's a profile on condition. There's a profile on immunization. There's a profile on practitioner. And these profiles, let's look, for example, at the patient here. Always the easiest one to understand. Every resource has a nice page on here, which is already kind of like an implementation guide. You will see all the different renderings here. So you can see, for example, the differential rendering, only the changes that this profile has made, or you can see the snapshot, so the complete resulting data model or a hybrid version of both. But you can also see the same in like a different kind of table view. You can see the XML version, the JSON version, etc. And also keep the history, manage issues, and manage mappings to different other resources. And this profile on patient is using an extension here that Ardon has made, the inclusion status. And that inclusion status is also a resource that lives in the same project here. So this extension is also in the project. So a project contains many different resources, conformance resources, profiles, extensions, and then we also have some example resources here. So for example, let's look at this one patient in here, Peter Chalmers, very popular name in the FHIR community. This is an overview of that patient. The patient has a birth date and an address and a way to contact them. And the nice thing of Simplifier is, besides giving all these pretty renderings, just by uploading a resource, is that you can hit validation on every resource. This Peter Chalmers patient, when we look at the XML or the JSON, is a patient resource. And in the method of profile, it claims to conform to the patient that we just saw, the patient profile that we have in this project. So when we do validation here, our validator is going to check whether, first of all, it's a valid patient at all, like against the base resource, but also whether it conforms to this hospital patient that it claims to conform to. And there are no issues, so it's all working well. And if there will be issues, we will also see inline where exactly the issues are. So these are the resources that we're going to work with. And on top of that, we have built an implementation guide. So when we go to guides here, we see that there's one implementation guide. When I just click it, I'll see what people will see, my customers will see basically. So I have a nice welcome page here, explaining a bit about the project. I have a table of contents with all the different pages in my project. I can, of course, embed some images here for more clarity. I give an overview of all the different FHIR artifacts. So, for example, on my profiles page here, I have a nice overview of this patient profile. So patient X, some details from the profile here, the canonical, some human readable description around what this resource is about and how it should be interpreted. And then I can embed all the different views that you also see within Simplifier. So this is the differential view, and it's the same interactive rendering that you also see on Simplifier itself. And we can also show the snapshot view, or the XML, or the table, or the JSON, etc. So we really provide a kind of website builder, but then with all the features that you need for FHIR to embed documentation on your resources. So when we go behind the scenes, we click on the edit button here, or I click on the edit button, is my project here. We see that there is this nice IG builder. This reflects the structure of my website. So we just went to the profiles page with all the different subpages on there about the patient, for example. And here we can see how it's built up. So most of the page is just built out of Markdown, just a very simple formatting language. Like this is a header, and this is a smaller header. This is a list, etc. So it's very easy to type. It has a live feedback. So if you make any changes here, scope, I'll just make this about scope, and I hit Control Enter or the refresh button here, and it's updated, and it's also live updated on our implementation guide. And then, as I mentioned, we have these FHIR specific things like this differential rendering. And here, when we look behind the scenes, we can see how that's done. So I can just type it's a bit mangled on my small screen here, but I can type the little curly bracket, and then give the tree command, and then specify the canonical, so the unique identifier of this resource that we want to render, and it will give us a nice rendering. And in this case, I specified I want the differential rendering, but we can also make this the hybrid rendering, as easy as that. Only my header doesn't fit anymore, but hybrid, so fixed. So this is a really easy way to build together, bring together an implementation guide. There's a help section here on the bottom. The help section actually also tries to explain how implementation guides work by being an implementation guide itself for extra inception. So we can see here, just mark down how you would make a link, for example. But we also see that we have some useful links. For example, this is a document I think is mainly maintained by Lloyd and other people in the FHIR community on what are the best practices for an implementation guide, how your pages should be organized, how to write your narrative, so this human readable description around it, images, artifacts, etc., what you would all use, and how you should define support and all these kind of things. So this is really useful, and it's relevant for any implementation guide, whichever tool you use to build it. And then it also gives explanation on, well, the markdown specific things, how to make a link, etc., but also the FHIR specific things, how you would, well, we added some extra commands, for example, to make table of contents, or the tree rendering that I just showed you, how to do that, or the XML rendering, etc. So this is your friend if you want to learn how to embed something. So this is the meat of the building and implementation guide, adding extra pages, putting your content in there, adding renderings. Then there's a few settings which you can use. And we'll use those in the tutorial, so you can provide some metadata on the implementation guide. But you can also specify the style. So we have a few different default styles, and on our paid plans, there's more to choose from, or custom ones you can make. So this is a nice one that you can play around with, which style you like the most. And then the scope is something which we'll reach at the end of the tutorial. And this is just saying, do you want to render the resources from your live development project, or do you want to render them from your stable release packages? So of course, when you're going to make a stable documentation, you want to publish those point those to the package instead of your live ever-changing development resources. Good, so this is a bit of guidance on the implementation guide building process in general. Then let's get back to the tutorial. So what it's telling us to do is, well, step one, create your own FHIR project. So first step is that you need a Simplifier account. Well, this is a free account, so you would just go to simplifier.net. And if you're not logged in, you will have a sign up button on the top right. You confirm your email address and then you have an account. If you downloaded Forge, you already have one. Then we're going to our portal and creating our first project. So your portal, you can always reach that from the top right here and then go to portal. If you click on your avatar, and here you will have a button to create a project. Your free account will give you one project. So if you already have one, you might want to reuse that one or delete it and create a new one. Or if you don't have one, you can hit the create button here. You will go through a few steps here. So this is my demonstration tutorial, publishing with Simplifier. Publishing with Simplifier.net. Description the same. We're going to use FHIR version R4. The scope, I prefer if you're just testing to set this to test, so you don't confuse people to act like this is the national standard for Iceland or anything. And then you can either make a public project on your free account, or if you have another plan, you can go for private. And just keep it public now, because that's the most of you will do. So now we have an empty project that we can work with and can start to develop on that. If you want to make it a bit prettier, you can add a nice description here. So welcome to my project. It's always very important to use emojis. So I'll do that here. And we save that. Other things you will want to do is you can give it a nice image, so an avatar that will show up here. And you can also define the canonical base URL. So this is something to tell other people, like in my project, all resources will generally start with this canonical. So I also want other people not to publish within that. So in my case, that would, for example, be Weistra.nl/FHIR. So this should be an URL that you control, that you own, because of course you cannot claim to make official HL7 resources or anything like that. So I've specified that. And we're now back in my project and we have a good start. We just don't have any resources yet to talk about. So let's go back to the project. And Ardon, I'm sure you will break in when there's any questions, right?
Yeah, no questions so far.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So we've now configured the project. We made it pretty, but we did not do this step yet. Dependencies. So dependencies is really specifying what are the building blocks that you're going to build on. Generally, well, no, always you will build on something, on some version of the FHIR core specification. If you're building in R4, in FHIR R4, you're going to build on HL7.FHIR.R4.core, core.R4. And then the latest version of that is 4.0.1. If you're building just for the US market, and in this case, we're going to do that, you also want to see if there is a national standard for your country. And of course, the US has the hsf.fire.us.core. So the US core specification, the latest version is 3.2.0. So this is what we're going to specify that we're going to be building on. So let me go back to the project that I worked with. We're going to go to our dependencies tab here. And you see that you get this one for free always, or just by default. And when we go to manage, I'm going to specify that I'm also going to build on hsf.fire.us.core. Yep. And then it will tell me, okay, which version do you want? And I just want the latest version here. So 3.2.0, and we save. And now we've set our dependencies. So now we can build our own resources and refer to anything within US core or within the FHIR core, and we'll know, the tool will know what you're talking about. Great. So now we have our setup done, and it's time to get some resources in. So what I'm recommending is to reuse all the things that I've already set up within my demo project here. So what we're going to do is to download the current project. We're going to upload to our, so the current, the tutorial project. We're going to upload that to our newly created project. And then we're going to start editing the implementation guide. So let's do those 3 steps. I'm going to scroll up in the tutorial project. I say download and then zip the entire project. You can also zip only the FHIR resources, but in this case, we also want other things like pages and those kind of things. Zip project, so that's done very quickly. And then we can go back to our project. And here, instead of download, we say upload. Upload the file. We can just upload the entire zip file at once. No, let's not upload my slides. Let's upload this one. And we're uploading that to our Simplifier project. Again, very quickly done. All our pages and all our resources that we saw in the tutorial project are now in my new demonstration project. This is one way of getting your resources in there. Other options are just directly sending it there from Forge, or sending it there with Firelit terminal from the command line, or connecting your project with a GitHub repository. So then on every change in your GitHub repository, it will update the resources within your FHIR project. So if you like working with Git, that is a really nice option. So we have our resources here now. We see a nice breakdown of all the different resources. And the only thing yet, so you will see in your guides tab that there is no guide yet, although we do have an implementation guide resource. So we need to tell Simplifier, okay, I want to start building an implementation guide based on that implementation guide resource. So when we go to the implementation guide resource in the resources tab here, we see a nice breakdown of what the implementation guide resources looks like. So it has all the different pages and the hierarchy in there. So the FHIR artifacts page, for example. But we want to start editing this within our implementation guide editor. So we say update and then edit, create an IG and start updating in the IG editor. And this is the only step you need to do. You need to decide whether it's public or private. And now we have the project within our implementation guide editor ready to go. It will now have the default styling again. So when we go to the settings here and go to style, we can choose whether we want this kind of tree table. So maybe let's quickly show what that looks like. So now we have this navigation on the left here. It's fine, but I think I prefer the palatable style, so more like an HL7 IG. Let's go back to our implementation guide, and we see that all these changes are made live here. So now we have the same format as we had before. So now your own project will have the exact same resources as the tutorial project. So now we can start extending from that. So let's go back to the exercises here. We've configured the project. We've uploaded the FHIR resources. We got that implementation guide resource going.
Art, we have one question about the previous step.
Okay.
How do we get to the edit? I've uploaded and downloaded. So perhaps you can show again how you can navigate to the uploaded IG and see how you can convert it to an actual IG.
Yeah, so let's see. I'll go back to the project. I'll go back to the project here that I could. So this is my second project, the newly created one. You want to either click here on implementation guide or just go to resources and here filter on implementation guide or search on it. And then you click through to the actual page for the implementation guide resource. And once we're on that page, we can go to update and say update by editing an IG editor.
Perfect.
And once that is done, you will see it under the guides tab within your project, and you can just hit the edit button there. Great.
Okay, thanks. Right. I'll also type it.
Nice. Yeah, and if there's still something missing, feel free to unmute and jump in. Let's see, where were we? Oh yeah. So now we get to the meat of the work and actually start improving the implementation guide that we have. So we saw that there is already some information within the implementation guide. I should clean up my tabs, but so we saw that there is some nice pages here about guidance and security, beautiful lorem ipsum. And there's some documentation already from the different profiles, but I deliberately did not specify anything yet for the condition here. So the condition, hospital condition, is still to do. So I want you to look at the pages for the other resources like immunization or practitioner and borrow from that and at least show a nice snapshot rendering here for the hospital condition. So please do try to figure out how that works. And in the meantime, I'll also show you myself. So we're here in the editor. Let's have a look at the patient here. So we have a nice header. Then this one I'll come back to in a moment. You can add some nice information here. So I just copied this basically from the FHIR specification. So information on patients. And then we can add a nice rendering. So let's just start here with the rendering. So instead of to do, I'm going to add a nice snapshot rendering here. And I'm just going to make this a bit bigger so you can see my current autocomplete settings here. And so I'm going to embed the snapshot rendering here. So when we go to the help page, we can see we want to show a resource overview. And then specifically, we're looking for the snapshot. So this is the command that we want to do. Curly bracket, and then 3. And then you want to specify the resource that we're talking about. And then you want to specify which rendering you want, snapshot or hybrid, etc. So let me show you how that works. I'll start by just typing curly bracket. And now it's going to give me all the different options in a nice autocomplete of the different structures I can make. So we're going to choose the 3 here. And this entire editor is built on the same editor that's also in Visual Studio Code. So it's a very powerful one with autocomplete and IntelliSense. So I'm going to put a colon here. And now it's going to autocomplete all the different canonicals because I have my autocomplete set to canonicals here. All the different canonicals that I can choose from. So which are in my project or in the projects that I'm depending on. So I want to embed the one for the condition. So that is the top one here that's suggested. I click on that one. It's added now. And now I can either close it. And then we can say Control Enter, or I can hit the little refresh button here. And it will show you a nice snapshot rendering of the resource. And we can choose here. So optionally, we can choose to say, okay, now I want the differential instead. Or I want the hybrid rendering instead. So these kind of things. So this is a really nice way to get your interactive rendering in there and exactly the one that you want. And then we can as I mentioned before, you can put any markdown here, so give a nice description. If you want to get really fancy, you can also copy from what we've done here with the patient and use something which we call the Firelit query language. So this, if you're familiar with SQL, then you might also like and understand FQL. It's SQL for Fire. So in this case, we're searching for some specific attributes from structure definitions. So we're going to look at all the structure definitions where the canonical matches our current specific canonical that we're looking at, so for the current resource. And then we're selecting for that resource the name, the description, the status, and the URL. So I'm just going to copy this one and paste it for my condition here. And I'm going to change the canonical to my condition canonical instead of the patient canonical. And now when I update it, I have a nice table with the 4 fields that we just selected from that resource. So this is a simple example of this. This is a very powerful language that we can also use to, for example, get all the constraints from a resource or get all the terminology bindings from a resource. So we can make exactly the same kind of page as we see for like a FHIR patient. FHIR patient will have all these different tables. For example, oh, these are the different resources that refer to this, this resource, or these are the terminology bindings or constraints, or here at the end, they generally link all the search parameters. So these are all kind of tables that we can make with Firelit query language. So this is something that you can get very creative with and also completely tune to how you would like it to look. We'll keep it simple for now and just stick with what I already did with the other resources. So this was step 1. And then let's go back to the exercises. Step 1. Sorry, yeah, here. Step 1 is completed. Step 2, we also want to add a new page for a patient example. So if we look at the project, you'll see that, well, if you look at the implementation guide, there's already a page for this immunization example, but not yet for this patient example. So I'm just gonna see what the patient looks like. And maybe I want to show the tree rendering, or maybe I want to show the XML rendering, or maybe both for this specific resource. Of course, a resource like a patient does not have a canonical, because these are not conformance resources, but we can still uniquely identify this resource by using the project URL key and resource URL key. So I'm just going to copy this one now, and we go back to the editor. And now, so under the examples, we already have a nice page for Peter Chalmers, so the patient example here, sorry, the immunization example. But now we're going to make an extra one for patient Peter Chalmers. So I'm going to make a child page of examples. So this is how to make a child page and say, okay, this is patient Peter James Chalmers. Okay, so now we have added a new page. And let's first start by embedding the XML overview. So I'm going to say, okay, this is the XML view of patient example, and I say curly bracket, XML. And now I'm going to switch to the files autocomplete rather than the canonical autocomplete, and give this a colon. And now it will tell me all the different files that I can choose from, or all the different projects and the files within them. But I'm just first going to say, I'm just going to copy and paste the project URL key and the resource URL key, and end with curly bracket. And now we have embedded the XML for the patient. And just like that, we can show the nice tree rendering of the patient. So here's the tree view of the patient example. And we say tree instead of our XML. And then as easy as that, we have the tree rendering. Maybe let's have a look how it looks like in the real life IG. So under examples, it's added to the table of contents here, but it's also added to the menu. We can go to patient Peter Chalmers, and we see the tree view here. It's a nice interactive view of Peter and the XML view. So you can embed any of these views that you want. Maybe to get bonus points, we'll also add a link back to the resource that we're talking about. So just like we did here for the immunization, we'll link back to the immunization. I'm going to do that for our patient too. So I'm going to say this is an example of the profile for the profile on patients. And then I want to link to another page within my implementation guide. So I say page link. And then the page is called Hospital X Patient. And that should work. So now we have a nice link to our Hospital X Patient. Let's see how it looks like in the UI. And there we are, and now it links to our other page within the implementation guide where the profile is described. Great. Let's see. We have 3 minutes left, Ardon.
Yeah, you're right.
Great. So maybe I should leave the rest of the exercises for you. At least add one embedded image. I just want to tell you where to look. There's already an example of how to embed an image here within the code guidance. So upload the image to your project and then see the URL key, and you can embed it with based on the URL key. Publishing a FHIR package. I'm afraid I need to rush this a bit. So let's go back to our project. Let's say we're completely happy with our project now. And I'm actually going to do this on the tutorial project, I think. So you would go to your packages page. Earlier in the dependencies, we've set the other package that we depend on, and now it's time to actually make a package of ourselves. So you would go to your packages tab here, and it will show you all the packages you've already created. For you, that's probably nothing yet. And then you say create, you create a new package, or in my case, I'll create a new version of the existing package. And it will give us a nice guidance of how to get through that. You fill in your version number. Please take care that you fill in, use this dash and then say some kind of anything behind this. So you indicate to people that this is not a real package that people should be using. And give it any information that you want and save it as a package. Great. And I think I'll leave it at that given the time. Are there any questions left?
Yeah. I have a question here. Can I create an IG without publishing it anywhere? What if I just need to maintain the IG for my team only, not make it available for everyone?
Yeah, sure, you can. So in this case, we chose to make a public project, but then you would make a private project. With that, you can also make your implementation guide. Well, we currently chose to make it public, but you can make it private. And then you will add your team members to the team. Or you can also choose to export your implementation guide. You just get all the files to host it on your internal web server for your team. Yeah, do note that private projects are for Simplifier are a paid feature, but available on our cheapest plan as well.
And then a quick, maybe last question. Does it support diagrams done with PlantUML? So I guess the bigger question is, what does the rendering of images?
Yeah, so great question. It supports any image. So if you make sure that within PlantUML you generated a nice image, like for example, I think this probably came from that. Then you just upload the resulting image, PNG or anything to your project, and then you can embed it. So for example, you might want to do the conversion within your GitHub repository, and then you can sync all the resources and images to your Simplifier project and build the implementation guide that way. And the same holds for like using Fish, for example. you convert your fish files to JSON already within your GitHub repository or locally, and then you upload those JSON resources to be used within your implementation guide.
Nice, thanks, Ward. Well, you handled all the questions and we're out of time. So I guess this is a good moment to.
Yeah, thank you for attending all. And if there's any other questions, feel free to reach out to me or put them in the Q&A, and then we'll get back to them later.
Nice, thanks very much, Ward.